In the magnificent kingdom of Aldoria, where golden spires pierce the clouds and ancient traditions hold more power than armies, a single moment would shatter centuries of royal protocol. What happens when the future king discovers that the woman who raised him as a mother has been secretly recording every private conversation within the palace walls?
Look, over
when Prince
there!
Alexander
What is it,
confronts
Harry?
Queen Consort Isabella in
Trouble.
the throne
We
room,
must act now.
witnessed
I
by the
see it
entire
now.
royal court, the revelation will expose a web of betrayal so deep that it threatens to topple the very foundation of the monarchy. This is not just a story of royal intrigue, it's a tale of broken trust, hidden agendas, and the devastating moment when a son must choose between family loyalty and the crown's honor. As secrets buried for decades finally surface, the kingdom of Aldoria will discover that sometimes the greatest threats to a throne come not from enemy armies, but from those who sleep within the palace walls. The crown jewels may glitter, but beneath their brilliance lies a darkness that could destroy everything the royal family has built. When Alexander gives the order that shocks the kingdom, he sets in motion events that will either save his reign or mark the beginning of the end for the House of Aldoria. The morning sun cast long shadows through the stained glass windows of the grand library in Aldoria Palace, painting rainbow patterns across the ancient leather-bound books that lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Prince Alexander stood motionless between the towering shelves, his hands trembling as he held a small silver device no larger than a coin. The recording device felt impossibly heavy in his palm, though it weighed almost nothing. His world had just collapsed with the weight of a whisper. "Your Highness?" Sir Edmund Blackwood, the palace's chief security officer, stood respectfully near the doorway, his weathered face etched with concern. He had served 3 generations of Aldorian royalty, and in all his years he had never seen the crown prince look so utterly devastated. "Perhaps we should discuss this in private chambers." Alexander's blue eyes, normally bright with confidence and warmth, now appeared hollow as he stared at the device. "Tell me again how you found this, Edmund. Every detail. Leave nothing out." Sir Edmund stepped closer, his military bearing evident in every measured movement. "During our routine security sweep of the Queen Consort's private study, our electronic detection equipment registered an anomaly. The device was hidden inside the base of her antique letter opener, the one she received as a wedding gift from the Empress of Valdonia. We almost missed it. It's remarkably sophisticated technology, military grade, not something available to civilians." The prince closed his eyes, memories flooding back like a broken dam. Isabella had been present during every important conversation he'd had in recent months. She had comforted him when his father, King Marcus, had fallen ill with the mysterious ailment that still plagued him. She had been there when Alexander had confided his doubts about the arranged marriage with Princess Charlotte of Westmarch. She had listened with such understanding when he spoke of his dreams for modernizing Aldoria, his plans to reduce the monarchy's influence over Parliament, his secret correspondence with democratic reform leaders. "How long has it been active?" Alexander's voice was barely above a whisper. "According to our technical analysis, at least 18 months. Possibly longer." Sir Edmund paused, choosing his words carefully.
Your Highness, the device has a transmission capability.
Whatever conversations were recorded were not just stored locally, they were being sent elsewhere. The implications hit Alexander like a physical blow. 18 months ago was when Isabella had first begun encouraging him to share his thoughts with her, suggesting private walks in the garden where they could speak freely away from the formality of court. She had presented herself as the understanding stepmother, the voice of reason in a world of rigid protocol. She had been there when he expressed frustration with the old guard nobles who resisted his progressive ideas. She had nodded sympathetically when he criticized certain policies of neighboring kingdoms. "Who else knows about this discovery?" Alexander asked, finally looking up from the device. "Only myself and Lieutenant Catherine Wells, my most trusted deputy. I ordered complete discretion until I could inform you personally. However, Your Highness, given the sensitivity of this matter, I believe we must consider the possibility that Queen Consort Isabella is not acting alone." Alexander walked to the great window that overlooked the palace courtyard. Below, he could see Isabella in her morning routine, gracefully moving through the rose garden with her lady-in-waiting, Lady Margaret Thornfield. She wore a pale blue dress that complemented her auburn hair, and from this distance she appeared every inch the beloved Queen Consort that the people of Aldoria adored. The irony was not lost on him that she looked like the perfect picture of royal grace while being potentially the greatest threat to the kingdom's security. 23 years, Alexander said, his breath fogging the cold glass. "She's been part of this family for 23 years. She was there when my mother died, held me when I cried, taught me about duty and honor. How does someone live such a complete lie for so long?" Sir Edmund had no answer for that question. In his experience, the most dangerous enemies were often those who appeared most trustworthy. Your Highness, we need to consider our next steps very carefully. If Queen Consort Isabella is indeed working for a foreign power or hostile faction, she has access to state secrets that could compromise national security. The information she's gathered could be used to destabilize the monarchy, manipulate trade negotiations, or even coordinate an invasion. Alexander turned back to face his security chief. And Sir Edmund was struck by how much the prince had aged in just the past hour. The carefree young man who had joked with servants and challenged traditions with a smile had been replaced by someone who suddenly understood the crushing weight of royal responsibility. I need to know everything she's transmitted. Can our intelligence services intercept or trace where these recordings were sent? We're working on that now, Your Highness. Our preliminary analysis suggests the transmissions were encrypted and sent through multiple proxy servers. Whoever is receiving this information has significant technical resources. This is not the work of simple palace gossips or tabloid journalists. This appears to be a sophisticated intelligence operation. The prince began pacing, his mind racing through possibilities. What about her personal relationships? Her correspondence? Her financial records? We've initiated discrete investigations into all those areas. However, given her position, we must be extremely careful. Any obvious surveillance of the Queen Consort would be noticed immediately by her staff and potentially by foreign intelligence services monitoring our activities. Alexander stopped pacing and fixed Sir Edmund with a steady gaze. What would you advise? What does your experience tell you we should do? The old soldier was quiet for a long moment, weighing his words. Your Highness, in my professional opinion, we have three options. First, we could attempt to turn this situation to our advantage by feeding false information through Isabella to mislead whoever is controlling her. Second, we could quietly remove her from positions where she has access to sensitive information, perhaps suggesting a diplomatic mission abroad. Third, he hesitated. Say it. Third, we expose her publicly and let the consequences fall where they may. Each option has significant risks. Alexander understood those risks all too well. The first option required them to continue the charade, to pretend everything was normal while carefully controlling what information Isabella could access. It was dangerous because it meant keeping a known security threat close to the heart of the royal family. The second option might work, but Isabella was intelligent and observant. She would likely realize something had changed and could potentially accelerate whatever plan she was part of. The third option would create a public scandal that could shake the monarchy's foundation, especially given how beloved Isabella was among the people. There's another factor to consider, Alexander said slowly. My father's illness. Isabella has been his primary caregiver, managing his medications, his diet, his daily routine. If she's working against us, the unspoken possibility hung in the air like poison. King Marcus had fallen ill 6 months ago with symptoms that baffled the royal physicians. Fatigue, memory issues, occasional disorientation. The doctors had attributed it to stress and age, but now Alexander couldn't help wondering if there was a more sinister explanation.
We need Dr. Chet.
Harrison to run complete toxicology tests on my father immediately, Alexander said, his voice hardening with resolve. Discrete tests.
If she's been harming him?
I need to know. Sir Edmund nodded grimly. I'll arrange that personally. What about the Queen Consort herself? How do you want to proceed with surveillance? Careful observation, nothing more for now. I need time to think, to plan. This affects more than just our family's personal relationships. If Isabella has been transmitting state secrets, it could compromise our military defenses, our trade agreements, our diplomatic relationships with allied nations. The ramifications could be enormous. As if summoned by their conversation, a soft knock came at the library door. Alexander quickly pocketed the recording device as Lady Margaret Thornfield entered with a respectful curtsy. Your Highness, Queen Consort Isabella requests your presence in the morning room. She says it's regarding the arrangements for tomorrow's state dinner with the Bavarian delegation. Alexander felt his stomach clench. Tomorrow's dinner would include discussions of a proposed military alliance with Bavaria, sensitive negotiations that could affect regional security for decades. The thought that Isabella would be present for those conversations, potentially recording every word, made him feel physically ill.
Tell Her Majesty I'll be there shortly, he managed to say with reasonable composure.
After Lady Margaret left, Alexander turned back to Sir Edmund. Begin the investigation immediately. I want to know everything about Isabella's activities, contacts, and communications over the past 2 years. But Edmund, he paused, his voice dropping to an intense whisper. Absolute discretion. If word of this leaks before we're ready to act, it could destroy not just our family, but potentially the entire kingdom. Sir Edmund bowed deeply.
You have my word, Your Highness.
I'll report directly to you every 12 hours with updates. As the security chief left, Alexander remained alone in the library, surrounded by centuries of Eldorian history and wisdom. He pulled the recording device from his pocket and stared at it again. This small piece of technology that had the power to destroy everything he held dear. The morning sun had shifted, and the rainbow patterns on the walls had faded to simple shadows. He thought about his mother, Queen Elena, who had died when he was 7 years old. She had always told him that the crown was not a privilege but a responsibility, that protecting the kingdom meant making difficult choices that others couldn't or wouldn't make. At the time, he thought she was talking about military decisions or economic policies. He never imagined he would have to choose between family loyalty and national security. The walk to the morning room felt like a death march. With each step through the palace corridors, past portraits of his ancestors who had ruled Eldoria for 8 centuries, Alexander prepared himself for what might be the most challenging performance of his life. He would have to sit across from Isabella, look into the eyes that had once seemed so caring, and pretend that nothing had changed while gathering information about her betrayal. As he approached the morning room, he could hear Isabella's melodic laugh through the partially open door. It was the same laugh that had comforted him through childhood nightmares and celebrated his achievements. Now, it sounded different, sinister, like beautiful music hiding deadly words. Alexander straightened his shoulders, took a deep breath, and prepared to face the woman who had shaped his life and might now be orchestrating its destruction. The future of Eldoria depended on his ability to play this game better than she had been playing it for the past 18 months. The crown jewels in the tower might sparkle with ancient glory, but in this moment, Alexander understood that the true test of royalty was not wearing the crown with grace, but knowing when and how to remove the crown from those who would use it to destroy everything it represented. 2 days had passed since the discovery of the recording device, and Alexander felt as though he was living in 2 different worlds. During the day, he maintained his royal duties with practiced precision, attending cabinet meetings, greeting foreign dignitaries, and playing the role of the confident crown prince. But at night, when the palace grew quiet and the servants retired to their quarters, he met secretly with Sir Edmund in the hidden chambers beneath the ancient chapel to review the mounting evidence against Isabella. The underground meeting room had been carved from solid rock during the 14th century, originally designed as a refuge during sieges. Now it served as a secure location where the most sensitive royal business could be conducted without fear of surveillance. The stone walls seemed to absorb sound, creating an atmosphere of hushed urgency that matched the gravity of their discoveries. The toxicology results are conclusive, Dr. Harrison said, his elderly hand shaking as he placed a thick medical report on the wooden table. The royal physician had served the family for over 30 years, and his loyalty was beyond question. His Majesty has been systematically poisoned with a rare compound derived from oleander and foxglove. The dosage has been carefully calibrated to cause cognitive impairment and physical weakness without triggering immediate suspicion of foul play.
Alexander felt the blood drain from his face.
Despite his growing suspicions, hearing the confirmation that Isabella had been slowly murdering his father hit him like a physical blow. How long has this been happening? Based on the concentration levels and the king's symptom progression, I estimate at least 8 months. Possibly longer. The compound is administered in very small doses, likely in food or drink, which would make it nearly impossible to detect without specific testing. Whoever is doing this has considerable knowledge of pharmacology and toxicology. Sir Edmund leaned forward, his grizzled features grim in the candlelight. We've been monitoring Isabella's activities around the clock. She personally prepares His Majesty's evening tea every night, claiming it helps him sleep better. She's also been managing his medication schedule and meal planning. She has abundant opportunities to administer the poison. But why? Alexander struggled to understand the motivation behind such a calculated betrayal. If she wanted my father dead, why not use something faster? Why this slow torture? Lieutenant Catherine Wells, Sir Edmund's trusted deputy, spoke for the first time. She was a sharp woman in her mid-30s, a former military intelligence officer who had joined the palace security team 5 years earlier. Because, Your Highness, a slow decline appears natural. If His Majesty died suddenly, there would be immediate investigations, autopsies, questions. but a gradual deterioration due to stress and age. No one suspects murder. Meanwhile, as the king becomes less capable of ruling, more power naturally shifts to other members of the royal family. And to the queen consort, Alexander realized with growing horror. She's been positioning herself as his primary caretaker, the person everyone trusts to speak for him when he's too ill to speak for himself. Doctor... Harrison nodded sadly. I'm ashamed to say that I contributed to this deception unknowingly. When Isabella told me the king was feeling confused or tired, I adjusted his medications accordingly. When she reported that he was having trouble sleeping, I prescribed stronger sedatives. I was treating the symptoms of poisoning while the perpetrator continued to administer more poison. Sir Edmund opened a leather portfolio filled with documents and photographs. Our investigation has revealed much more. Isabella has been in regular communication with agents of the Vorthian Republic. We intercepted several coded messages hidden within her routine correspondence with various noble families across Europe. The Vorthian Republic was Aldoria's primary political rival, a militaristic nation that had been pushing for territorial expansion for decades. They had long viewed Aldoria's strategic position and natural resources with envy, but direct military action would trigger responses from Aldoria's powerful allies. However, internal destabilization of the Aldorian monarchy would create opportunities for Vorthian influence and eventual control. The messages indicate that Isabella's mission has multiple objectives, Lieutenant Wells continued. First, gather intelligence on Aldorian military capabilities, trade agreements, and diplomatic relationships. Second, gradually eliminate or incapacitate key members of the royal family. Third, position herself to influence succession decisions and political direction. Alexander studied the photographs of intercepted documents, each one representing another layer of betrayal. How long has she been working for them? We believe her recruitment occurred several years before her marriage to your father, Sir Edmund replied. The Vorthians likely identified her as a potential asset when she was still Duchess Isabella of Moravia. Her first marriage to Duke Charles ended conveniently in his accidental death during a hunting expedition. We're now investigating whether that accident was as accidental as it appeared. The implications were staggering. Isabella's entire relationship with the royal family might have been orchestrated by a foreign intelligence service. Her courtship of King Marcus, her integration into palace life, her gradual assumption of important responsibilities, all of it could have been part of a decades-long plan to infiltrate and ultimately control Aldoria from within. What about her inner circle? Alexander asked. Lady Margaret, her personal secretary, the household staff assigned to her quarters? Lady Margaret Thornfield appears to be a genuine friend and loyal supporter, unaware of Isabella's true activities. Lieutenant Wells reported. However, we've identified 2 members of Isabella's household staff who have connections to Vorthian nationals. Her personal maid, Elena Vasquez, sends money regularly to relatives in a border town that serves as a known Vorthian intelligence hub. And James Fletcher, one of her footmen, has a sister married to a Vorthian military officer. Alexander pushed back from the table and began pacing the small chamber. The weight of these revelations was overwhelming. Not only was his stepmother a foreign agent who had been slowly killing his father, but she had potentially compromised the entire palace security by recruiting additional assets among the staff. We need to know the full extent of the conspiracy, he said finally. How many others are involved? What exactly have they transmitted to Vorthia? What are their ultimate objectives beyond gathering intelligence and removing obstacles? Dr. Harrison cleared his throat nervously. Your Highness, there's another matter we must discuss. Given the systematic poisoning of His Majesty, we need to consider the possibility that you and other family members may also be targets.
The thought had occurred to Alexander, but hearing it spoken aloud made it terrifyingly real.
What precautions should we take? I recommend that all food and beverages consumed by immediate royal family members be prepared by trusted staff and tested before consumption. We should also conduct comprehensive medical examinations to check for any signs of slow-acting toxins. Additionally, your personal security detail should be enhanced. Sir Edmund nodded his agreement. We've already begun implementing discreet security measures. Your personal bodyguard detail now includes agents who are unaware they're participating in a counterintelligence operation. We've also installed additional surveillance equipment in areas where family members spend time. What about Isabella herself? Is she becoming suspicious of any changes in routine or behavior? Lieutenant Wells consulted her notes. She's made several subtle inquiries about your recent activities, particularly asking staff about your whereabouts during times when you've been meeting with us. She's also attempted to engage you in private conversations more frequently than usual. Yesterday, she specifically asked Lady Margaret to arrange a private dinner for just the two of you. Alexander remembered that invitation. Isabella had presented it as an opportunity to discuss his upcoming diplomatic mission to the northern provinces, but now he realized it might have been an attempt to gather information about his knowledge of her activities, or possibly even an opportunity to eliminate him if she suspected her cover was compromised. "We need to be extremely careful about how we proceed," Alexander said, returning to the table. "If Isabella realizes we're onto her, she could accelerate whatever timeline she's working under. That could mean immediate danger for my father, for me, and potentially for the entire royal family." Dr. Harrison leaned forward urgently. "Your Highness, regarding His Majesty's treatment, I believe I can counteract the effects of the poisoning if we act quickly. However, we must find a way to prevent further toxin administration without alerting Isabella to our knowledge. What do you recommend?" "I can prescribe a new medication regimen that will appear to address His Majesty's symptoms while actually serving as an antidote to the specific toxins being used. However, someone other than Isabella must administer these medications. We need a plausible reason to change the routine."
Alexander considered this carefully.
Any sudden change in his father's care routine would certainly raise Isabella's suspicions. They needed a cover story that would seem natural and legitimate. "What if we arrange for a comprehensive medical consultation with specialists from the Royal Medical College?" he suggested. "We could frame it as seeking second opinions due to the king's slow recovery. As part of the new treatment protocol, we could insist that all medications be administered by qualified medical staff rather than family members." Sir Edmund smiled grimly. "That's excellent thinking, Your Highness."
It provides justification for changing procedures without directly challenging Isabella's current role. However, Lieutenant Wells interjected,
"We must be prepared for the possibility that Isabella will resist such changes or attempt to maintain access to His Majesty's food and beverages through other means." The meeting continued for another hour, as they developed detailed plans for protecting King Marcus while continuing to gather evidence against Isabella. They established communication protocols using codes and signals that would allow them to coordinate activities without arousing suspicion. They identified additional palace staff who could be trusted with varying levels of information about the situation. As the meeting concluded and the participants prepared to return separately to their regular duties, Alexander felt the full weight of leadership settling on his shoulders. In just a few days, he had gone from being a crown prince focused on modernizing his kingdom to a man responsible for exposing a complex foreign conspiracy that threatened everything his family had built. "Sir Edmund," he said as the others departed, "I need you to arrange something. Tomorrow evening, I want to have a private conversation with Isabella, not in her quarters or mine, but somewhere we can talk freely. I need to test her reactions, perhaps prompt her to reveal more about her activities." The security chief looked concerned. "Your Highness, that could be extremely dangerous if she suspects. I know the risks. But we need more information, and the only way to get it is to take calculated chances." Besides, Alexander's jaw set with determination. "It's time I stopped thinking of myself as her stepson, and started thinking of myself as the future king of Oldoria. And kings don't hide from their enemies, they confront them." As Alexander made his way back through the secret passages to his private chambers, he reflected on how much his understanding of leadership had changed in just 3 days. Being a good king wasn't just about inspiring people or making wise policy decisions. Sometimes it meant making impossible choices between personal loyalty and national security, between the safety of loved ones and the safety of an entire kingdom. The candles in his chambers cast dancing shadows on the walls as he prepared for another night of careful performance, pretending that nothing had changed while every fiber of his being screamed at the injustice and betrayal he now knew existed at the heart of his family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations, and quite possibly the most dangerous conversation of his life. The Royal Observatory sat atop the highest tower of Aldoria Palace, its copper dome gleaming in the late afternoon sun. Alexander had chosen this location carefully for his private meeting with Isabella. The circular chamber, with its astronomical instruments and star charts, provided an intimate setting while the advanced security equipment recently installed by Sir Edmund's team would capture every word of their conversation. Isabella arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, as Alexander had requested. She wore an elegant emerald dress that complemented her auburn hair, and her smile seemed genuine as she entered the observatory. To anyone observing, they would appear to be a devoted stepmother and son sharing a quiet moment together, perhaps discussing family matters or Alexander's future responsibilities. "What a lovely idea, Alexander," Isabella said, moving to admire the great telescope that pointed toward the early evening sky. I've always found this room peaceful. It reminds us that there are forces much larger than our earthly concerns. Her voice carried the same warm tone that had comforted him throughout his childhood, and for a moment, Alexander almost doubted the evidence against her. I thought we could use some time away from the formal atmosphere of the staterooms, he replied, watching her carefully for any signs of nervousness or deception. There are matters I'd like to discuss with you, things that have been weighing on my mind. Isabella settled gracefully into one of the leather chairs positioned near the great window overlooking the palace grounds. Of course, dear, you know I'm always here to listen. Is this about your father's health? I know his condition has been causing you considerable worry. The mention of his father's condition sent a surge of anger through Alexander, but he maintained his composure.
Partly, yes.
Dr. Harrison has recommended some changes to father's care routine. Specialists from the Royal Medical College will be taking over certain aspects of his treatment. He watched for Isabella's reaction and saw the briefest flicker of something concern? Annoyance? Cross her features before her expression returned to one of caring interest. I see. Well, if the doctors believe it's necessary, of course we must follow their guidance. Though I must say, I've become quite familiar with your father's needs and preferences. I hope these specialists will consult with me about his daily routine. I'm sure they will, Alexander said non-committally. Actually, Isabella, I wanted to talk to you about something else as well. I've been reflecting on family history lately, thinking about the responsibilities that come with the crown. That's natural for someone in your position. The weight of tradition can be both inspiring and overwhelming. Alexander rose and walked to one of the star charts mounted on the wall, pretending to study the constellations while formulating his next words. I've been particularly interested in understanding how external influences have shaped our kingdom's development over the centuries. Foreign alliances, trade relationships, diplomatic marriages, all the ways that outside forces have affected Aldorian policy. A wise area of study, Isabella replied, her tone remaining neutral. Understanding the interconnected nature of European politics is essential for effective leadership.
Yes, exactly.
For instance, I've been reading about how intelligence services from various nations have attempted to influence royal courts throughout history. It's fascinating how sophisticated these operations can be. Alexander turned to face her directly. Some of the methods described in these historical accounts are remarkably clever. Agents would sometimes spend years, even decades, building trust and gaining access before revealing their true purposes. Isabella's posture remained relaxed, but Alexander noticed her hands had become still in her lap. Previously, she had been adjusting her jewelry and smoothing her dress, small, unconscious movements that suddenly ceased. Historical espionage is certainly a compelling subject, she said carefully, though I imagine the reality was often far less dramatic than the romanticized versions we read about in books. Perhaps. But the consequences were very real for the kingdoms that were successfully infiltrated. Alexander moved closer to her chair, his tone becoming more serious. I sometimes wonder whether we've been naive about such possibilities in our own time. Whether our trust in people has blinded us to potential threats. Trust is both our greatest strength and our greatest vulnerability, Isabella replied, meeting his gaze directly. But surely you don't suspect that Aldoria faces such dangers today? Our security services are quite capable, and our court life is hardly secretive enough to attract serious intelligence operations. Alexander felt a chill at her words. She was testing him, trying to gauge how much he knew or suspected. Her casual dismissal of the possibility seemed designed to discourage further inquiry, while simultaneously probing for information about the effectiveness of palace security. You're probably right, he said, returning to his chair, though recent events have made me more aware of how little I really know about the people closest to me. For instance, I realized the other day that despite all our conversations over the years, I know very little about your life before you married father. Isabella's smile became more measured. There's little of interest to discuss. I was raised in a rather conventional noble household in Moravia. I married young to Duke Charles, lived a quiet life managing estate affairs and charitable activities. After his death, I was fortunate enough to find love again with your father. Duke Charles's death must have been devastating for you. An accident during a hunting expedition, wasn't it? Yes. A terrible tragedy. Charles was an experienced rider, but his horse was spooked by something in the woods. He was thrown and struck his head on a rock. Isabella's voice carried appropriate sadness, but Alexander noticed she recited the details with the precision of someone who had repeated the same story many times. How long after his death did you and father begin corresponding? Oh, it was quite some time later. Nearly 2 years, I believe. Marcus reached out to offer condolences, as Charles and he had been acquainted through various royal gatherings. The correspondence began as simple courtesy but gradually became more personal. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. Father has always been kind to those experiencing loss. I'm sure his support meant a great deal to you during such a difficult time. He paused, then added casually, I don't suppose you maintained any connections with friends or family back in Moravia? It must be lonely being so far from your homeland. Some connections, of course. Distant cousins, a few childhood friends. But my life is here now, with this family. Aldoria has become my true home. Isabella adjusted her position slightly, turning more directly toward Alexander. You seem unusually interested in ancient history today, dear. Is there something specific that's prompted these questions? Alexander recognized that she was becoming suspicious of his inquiries and decided to shift his approach. Actually, yes. I've been thinking about the upcoming state dinner with the Bavarian delegation tomorrow evening. The proposed military alliance they're discussing could have significant implications for our kingdom's future. Indeed. Your father and I discussed the matter briefly. The Bavarians seem eager to formalize agreements that would position Aldoria as a key partner in their regional security initiatives. What was father's opinion about the proposal? Alexander asked. Though he knew his father had been too ill in recent weeks to focus properly on complex political matters, he expressed some concerns about overcommitting our military resources, but he recognized the potential benefits of strengthening ties with Bavaria. Of course, his judgment has been somewhat clouded by his illness lately. Isabella's tone suggested maternal concern, but Alexander now heard something else in it, a subtle dismissal of his father's mental capacity. Yes, his condition has been worrying, though I must say he seemed more alert during our conversation yesterday than he has in weeks. Isabella's eyebrows rose slightly. Oh, you had a lengthy conversation with him? We discussed several matters. Actually, he seemed quite sharp when talking about historical precedents for military alliances. He mentioned some interesting insights about the importance of maintaining independence even within cooperative frameworks. Alexander was lying. His father had been too weak for extended conversation, but he wanted to see how Isabella would respond to the suggestion that King Marcus might be more aware and engaged than she believed. That's encouraging. Perhaps the new medication adjustments Dr. Harrison mentioned are already having a positive effect. Alexander nodded, then stood and walked to the telescope. Isabella, may I ask you something directly? Of course. Do you ever feel that your position in this family is secure? I mean, as stepmother rather than biological mother, do you worry about your place in the succession, in the family's long-term plans? The question hung in the air for a long moment. Alexander could sense Isabella weighing her response carefully. I've never thought of my relationship with this family in terms of security or position, she said finally. I married your father because I loved him. I've tried to be a positive influence in your life because I care about you. The thought of calculating my place in succession or family politics is rather hurtful, Alexander. Her response sounded sincere, even wounded, but Alexander noticed she hadn't actually answered his question. Instead, she had deflected it by expressing hurt feelings. A classic manipulation technique. I apologize if the question seemed insensitive. I suppose I've been thinking about loyalty and belonging because of some of the decisions I'll need to make as future king. The weight of determining who can be truly trusted with state secrets, with family secrets. Trust is earned through consistent actions over time, Isabella replied. I would hope that 23 years of devotion to this family would speak for itself. Alexander returned to his chair and leaned forward slightly. You're absolutely right. Your devotion has been remarkable. In fact, I sometimes wonder if you care more about Aldoria's well-being than some people who were born here. Aldoria has given me everything. A loving husband, a son to cherish, a purpose greater than myself. I would do anything to protect this kingdom and this family. Anything? Alexander asked quietly. Isabella met his gaze steadily. Anything within my power, just as I know you would. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with Alexander probing delicately for more information, while Isabella skillfully deflected or redirected potentially revealing questions. By the time they parted, both participants understood that something important had occurred, though neither acknowledged it directly. As Isabella made her way back to her quarters, Alexander remained in the observatory, watching her graceful figure disappear down the tower stairs. Sir Edmund emerged from the concealed observation room, where he had been monitoring the conversation. "What's your assessment?" Alexander asked. "She's extremely skilled," Sir Edmund replied grimly. "Professional-level training in counter-interrogation techniques. She never directly lied that we could detect, but she provided no useful information and successfully avoided every trap you set. Most concerning, she seemed to be gathering as much intelligence about your knowledge and suspicions as you were trying to gather about her activities." Alexander stared out at the palace grounds as the sun set behind the western mountains. "She knows something has changed. Maybe not the specifics, but she's aware that I'm looking at her differently. Which means our timeline has just accelerated dramatically. If she reports tonight's conversation to her handlers, they may advise her to take immediate action." "What kind of immediate action?" Sir Edmund's expression was grave. "Given that she's been slowly poisoning His Majesty, and given the sophistication of the operation she's part of, I would expect her to either attempt to flee the country or to accelerate the elimination of primary targets."
Alexander felt his blood run cold.
"You mean she might try to kill Father tonight? It's a distinct possibility. We need to implement emergency security measures immediately." As if to emphasize the urgency of their situation, a commotion erupted from somewhere deep within the palace. Shouting voices echoed up the tower stairs, and Alexander could see guards running across the courtyard below. "Sir Edmund," Alexander said, his voice tight with dread, "I think it's already begun." Alexander and Sir Edmund raced down the tower stairs, their footsteps echoing off the ancient stone walls, as shouts and the sound of running boots filled the palace corridors. As they reached the main level, Lieutenant Wells appeared, her face flushed with urgency. "Your Highness, we have a situation. James Fletcher, Isabella's footman, was caught attempting to leave the palace grounds with several bags of documents. When the guards tried to stop him, he drew a concealed weapon and wounded Sergeant Morrison before fleeing into the East Gardens." Alexander's worst fears were materializing. "What about Isabella? Where is she now?" "We've lost visual contact. She was last seen entering her private quarters 20 minutes ago, but when we checked discreetly, the rooms were empty. Her lady-in-waiting, Lady Margaret, claims she knows nothing about Isabella's whereabouts." Sir Edmund's jaw tightened. "They're executing an extraction plan. Fletcher's escape attempt was likely meant to be a distraction, while Isabella used a different route out of the palace." He turned to Lieutenant Wells. "Have you secured His Majesty?" "Dr. Harrison is with him now, along with a full medical team. We've also posted additional guards at his chambers." "But Sir Edmund, there's something else. We found this hidden in Isabella's quarters." Lieutenant Wells handed over a small leather journal filled with handwritten notes in an elegant script. Alexander recognized Isabella's handwriting immediately, the same careful penmanship that had signed birthday cards and written encouraging notes throughout his childhood. Sir Edmund opened the journal, and his face grew pale as he scanned the contents. "These are detailed intelligence reports covering the past 18 months. Troop movements, defensive positions, diplomatic negotiations, economic vulnerabilities. She's documented everything. Cabinet meetings, private conversations, strategic planning sessions." Alexander looked at the journal with a mixture of fury and disbelief. Every family dinner, every casual conversation in the garden, every moment when they had trusted her with their thoughts and feelings had been transformed into intelligence assets for a foreign power. "There's more," Lieutenant Wells continued. Hidden compartment in her writing desk contained maps of the palace with security positions marked, radio equipment, and several vials of unidentified substances. "The poison components." Dr. Harrison's voice came from behind them as he approached at a quick pace. Despite his age, the royal physician had clearly been running. "I've examined them. Highly concentrated toxins that match what we found in His Majesty's system, plus several other compounds designed for different purposes. Some appear to be fast-acting, lethal agents." The implications were terrifying. Isabella had been prepared not just for slow poisoning, but for immediate elimination of targets if circumstances required it. "Doctor, how is my father?" Alexander asked. "Stable for now, but barely. We've administered the antidote compounds I prepared, and his vital signs are improving slightly. However, the cumulative damage from months of poisoning will take time to reverse, if it can be reversed completely." Alexander clenched his fists, fighting to control the rage building inside him. "Sir Edmund, what's our tactical situation? How many exits does Isabella have access to?" The palace has 47 different ways to exit the grounds, including several passages known only to the royal family and senior staff. However, we've managed to seal most of them. Our primary concern is the old smuggler's tunnel that runs from the wine cellars to the riverside docks. It's been abandoned for decades, but someone with detailed knowledge of palace architecture could potentially use it. Someone like a person who's lived here for 23 years, Alexander said grimly. Exactly. I've dispatched teams to both ends of the tunnel, but if Isabella has confederates waiting outside the palace grounds, they could facilitate her escape once she reaches the river. Lieutenant Wells stepped forward. Your Highness, we've also intercepted communications suggesting that a Vorthian naval vessel has been positioned in international waters approximately 30 miles offshore. If Isabella reaches a boat on the river, she could be extracted completely beyond our jurisdiction within hours. Alexander began pacing, his mind racing through options and consequences. Every moment Isabella remained free increased the danger to his family and the security risks to the kingdom. The intelligence she possessed could compromise Eldoria's defensive capabilities for years to come. We need to think like she does, he said finally. Isabella is intelligent, methodical, and has had decades to plan for this possibility. She won't take unnecessary risks, but she also won't abandon her mission easily. He stopped pacing and faced his advisors. What would be her highest priority objective if she knew her cover was blown? Sir Edmund considered carefully. Given the sophistication of the operation, I believe her handlers would have multiple contingency plans. Her first priority would be preserving the intelligence she's gathered and getting it to Vorthian authorities. Her second priority would be eliminating key targets to maximize the damage from her exposure. Key targets meaning family members who could testify about her activities and state officials who know about defensive plans and alliance negotiations. Precisely, which means, Your Highness, that you are likely her primary target after extracting the intelligence. Alexander felt a chill of understanding. Isabella wouldn't simply flee if she could help it. She would try to complete her mission by eliminating him and possibly his father, leaving the kingdom in chaos and succession uncertainty that Vorthia could exploit. Where would she make such an attempt? He asked. Harrison spoke up unexpectedly. The state dinner tomorrow evening. Every high-ranking government official, military leader, and foreign dignitary will be present. If she could infiltrate the event and use one of those fast-acting toxins, the scenario was nightmare material. A public assassination during a formal state dinner would not only eliminate key targets but create an international incident that could destabilize the entire region. She can't simply walk into the state dinner, Lieutenant Wells pointed out. Security protocols require advance clearance, and she's no longer in a position to obtain that legitimately. Unless, Alexander said with growing alarm, she's not planning to walk in through the front entrance. Sir Edmund's eyes widened with realization. The service entrances, the kitchen staff, the serving personnel, the musicians and entertainers. Someone with her knowledge of palace operations could potentially infiltrate through support staff. Or, Alexander continued the thought, she could have additional assets among the existing staff that we haven't identified yet. As if summoned by their conversation, a young guard appeared at the corridor entrance, breathing heavily from running. Sir Edmund, urgent report from the kitchen staff. The head pastry chef, Marie Dubois, failed to report for duty this evening. Her assistant found her apartment empty with signs of hasty departure. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. Marie Dubois had worked in the palace kitchens for 8 years. She had access to all food preparation areas and would be expected to be present during tomorrow's state dinner. If Isabella had recruited or replaced her, we need to assume the state dinner is compromised, Alexander declared. Sir Edmund, I want every member of the kitchen and service staff investigated immediately. Anyone who can't be completely verified should be excluded from tomorrow's event. Your Highness, Lieutenant Wells interjected, that level of scrutiny will be noticed by other staff members and potentially by foreign intelligence services monitoring our activities. If we appear to be responding to a specific threat, it could prompt acceleration of other operations we haven't detected yet.
Alexander understood the dilemma.
They needed to protect against the immediate threat while avoiding actions that would reveal the full extent of their knowledge about the conspiracy. Then we'll need to be subtle about it, he said. Dr. Harrison, can you arrange for a food safety inspection of the kitchens? Some kind of health department review that would require temporary staff adjustments? Certainly. I can cite concerns about contamination risks given His Majesty's delicate health condition. Good. Sir Edmund, coordinate with the inspection to identify any staff who raise concerns. Meanwhile, we need to continue hunting for Isabella herself. As they were speaking, A series of sharp whistle blasts echoed from somewhere outside the palace. The sound sent a jolt of recognition through Sir Edmund. Those are perimeter alerts. Someone's been spotted attempting to breach the outer security cordon. He immediately activated his radio device. All units report status. The response crackled through the small speaker. Eastgate reports suspicious activity near the old chapel ruins. Single female figure observed moving toward the river access point. Subject appeared to match description of target individual. Alexander felt his pulse quicken. Is it her? Possibly. The chapel ruins provide an excellent vantage point for observing palace security patterns, and they're positioned along a direct route to the river tunnel system. Lieutenant Wells was already moving toward the main entrance. I'll coordinate the response teams. If we can surround the area quickly enough, we might be able to capture her before she reaches the extraction point. Wait! Alexander called after her. If Isabella is there, she's not alone. This could be a trap designed to draw our security forces away from the palace. We need to maintain adequate protection here while pursuing her. Sir Edmund nodded approvingly. Wise thinking, Your Highness. We'll send a tactical team to investigate the chapel area, while keeping full security protocols in place at the palace itself. As the various team members dispersed to coordinate their responses, Alexander found himself alone for a moment in the corridor where he had played as a child, where Isabella had once comforted him after nightmares and celebrated his achievements. The contrast between those warm memories and the current reality of hunting her as an enemy agent created a profound sense of loss that went beyond simple betrayal. But there was no time for grief. The next few hours would determine whether Isabella's decades-long mission would succeed in destroying everything his family had built, or whether they could stop her before irreparable damage was done to the kingdom's security and the royal family's survival. Alexander straightened his shoulders and prepared to take command of the most critical operation of his life. The child who had trusted Isabella was gone. In his place stood the future king of Aldoria, ready to do whatever was necessary to protect his people and preserve the crown that would soon be his responsibility to wear. Dawn was breaking over Aldoria Palace as Alexander stood in the great throne room, surrounded by the assembled court and senior government officials. The magnificent chamber, with its soaring vaulted ceilings and ancient tapestries depicting 8 centuries of royal history, had been the site of coronations, declarations of war, and momentous announcements that shaped the kingdom's destiny. Today, it would witness perhaps the most shocking revelation in Aldorian history. The hunt for Isabella through the night had yielded unexpected results. Rather than fleeing toward the river as expected, she had doubled back through the chapel ruins and infiltrated the palace through forgotten maintenance passages. Sir Edmund's teams had discovered her hiding in the very heart of the castle, the royal document archives directly beneath the throne room itself. When they found her, Isabella was methodically photographing classified state documents with sophisticated equipment, her elegant evening gown replaced by practical dark clothing suitable for covert operations. The discovery confirmed that her mission went far beyond gathering intelligence through casual conversation. She had been systematically documenting Aldoria's most sensitive state secrets for transmission to Vorthian handlers. Now, as the morning light streamed through the tall windows, Isabella stood before the assembled court in restraints, flanked by palace guards. Her auburn hair was disheveled from the night's activities, but her bearing remained regal and defiant. Even in defeat, she projected the composed dignity that had made her beloved by the Aldorian people for over 2 decades. King Marcus, though still weak from months of poisoning, had insisted on being present for this confrontation. He sat upon the ancient throne of Aldoria, supported by cushions and attended by Dr. Harrison, but his eyes were clear with a clarity that had been absent for many months. The antidote treatments were working, and his mental faculties were returning even as his physical strength slowly recovered. Alexander stood beside his father's throne, wearing the ceremonial uniform that marked him as crown prince and heir to the kingdom. The weight of royal responsibility had settled upon his shoulders with crushing finality during the long night of hunting and capture. He was no longer the young man who had questioned tradition and sought to modernize the monarchy through gentle reform. He was now a ruler who had learned that sometimes the crown's greatest duty was protecting the kingdom from those who would destroy it from within. Isabella Moravia, Alexander's voice carried clearly through the hushed chamber, using her maiden name rather than her title as queen consort. You stand accused of treason against the kingdom of Aldoria, conspiracy with foreign powers, attempted murder of His Majesty King Marcus, and espionage activities spanning multiple decades. Isabella raised her chin slightly, meeting Alexander's gaze with steady composure. I stand before you without shame for my actions, Your Highness. Everything I have done has been in service to principles greater than the narrow interests of any single kingdom." The assembled courtiers gasped at her bold admission. Many of them had known Isabella for years, had danced at balls where she served as gracious hostess, had sought her counsel on various matters of state and society. To see her now acknowledging treasonous activities was a shock that would reverberate through Aldorian society for generations. "Explain to this court," King Marcus said, his voice still weak but carrying unmistakable royal authority, "how poisoning your husband and betraying the family that welcomed you serves any principle beyond selfish ambition and foreign gold." Isabel's expression softened slightly as she looked at the man she had been slowly murdering. "Marcus, you were never meant to be harmed. The original plan required only intelligence gathering and political influence. The decision to use more direct methods came later, when it became clear that Aldoria's alliance with Bavaria would create an unacceptable threat to regional stability. Sir Edmund stepped forward with a leather portfolio containing the evidence gathered during the investigation. Your Majesty, Your Highness, the documents recovered from the Queen Consort's chambers and her activities in the archives reveal the full scope of this conspiracy." He opened the portfolio and began reading from the official summary his team had prepared. "Intelligence analysis indicates that Isabella Moravia was recruited by Vorthian operatives approximately 20 to 8 years ago, while she was still unmarried and living in Moravia. Her first marriage to Duke Charles was arranged to provide her with noble credentials and social access. Duke Charles's death was indeed murder staged to appear accidental." Alexander felt his stomach clench as the full timeline of deception became clear. Isabella's entire adult life had been dedicated to this mission. Sir Edmund continued, "Her courtship and marriage to His Majesty was orchestrated to place her in position for long-term intelligence gathering and influence operations. Over the past 23 years, she has transmitted detailed information about Aldorian military capabilities, diplomatic strategies, economic policies, and royal family private communications." "How many others were involved in this conspiracy?" Alexander demanded. Isabella remained silent, but Sir Edmund consulted his notes. "We have identified at least 6 additional assets among palace staff and government officials. James Fletcher, the footman who attempted to escape yesterday, has been captured and is providing information under interrogation. Marie Dubois, the missing pastry chef, was found dead in a safe house outside the city, apparently eliminated by her handlers to prevent her capture. The revelation that other conspirators had been eliminated by their own allies added another layer of horror to the situation. Isabella had not been working alone, and the Vorthian intelligence service was willing to murder their own operatives to protect the broader conspiracy." "What was the ultimate objective?" King Marcus asked, leaning forward despite his weakness. For the first time, Isabella hesitated before responding. When she spoke, her voice carried a mixture of defiance and what might have been genuine conviction. "The Vorthian Republic seeks to prevent the militarization of this region through aggressive alliances that would threaten the balance of power. Aldoria's proposed partnership with Bavaria would have created a military bloc capable of threatening peaceful nations throughout Central Europe." Alexander stepped closer to where Isabella stood. "So you justified decades of lies, betrayal, and attempted murder by claiming to serve peace? You poisoned the man who loved you, who trusted you with his life and his kingdom, because you disagreed with his foreign policy." "I regret the necessity of harming Marcus," Isabella replied, her composure finally showing cracks. "But individual lives, even royal lives, are sometimes sacrificed for greater purposes. The information I provided to Vorthia has helped prevent conflicts that could have killed thousands." "Or," Alexander countered, "the information you provided has helped Vorthia plan invasions and destabilization campaigns that could kill thousands." "Your noble motives don't change the fact that you've betrayed every oath you swore and every person who trusted you." King Marcus struggled to stand, assisted by Dr. Harrison, and the entire court fell into respectful silence. Despite his physical frailty, his voice carried the authority of 8 centuries of Aldorian monarchy. "Isabella Moravia, by your own admission, you have committed acts of treason that strike at the very heart of this kingdom's sovereignty. You have violated every sacred trust placed in you as a member of this family and as Queen Consort of Aldoria." He paused, gathering strength. "However, before I pronounce judgment, I offer you one final opportunity to demonstrate whatever remnants of honor may remain in your soul. Provide complete information about Vorthian intelligence operations against Aldoria and our allies. Help us identify and neutralize the remaining threats you have helped create." Isabella was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving from King Marcus to Alexander, and finally to the assembled court, that represented everything she had worked to undermine. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I cannot betray those who trusted me to serve their cause, just as I could not ultimately betray the cause by revealing this operation when I realized you had discovered it. Some loyalties transcend personal safety. Alexander felt a surge of frustrated anger. Even now, facing execution for treason, Isabella continued to prioritize her commitment to foreign enemies over any consideration for the family she had deceived.
Then you have chosen your fate, King Marcus declared.
Isabella Moravia, I hereby strip you of all titles, honors, and recognition as Queen Consort of Aldoria. You are sentenced to life imprisonment for treason against the crown, with the possibility of commutation only if you provide full cooperation with ongoing security investigations. The sentence was surprisingly merciful, given the severity of Isabella's crimes. Alexander understood that his father, despite everything, could not bring himself to order the execution of the woman he had loved for over 20 years. Isabella received the sentence without visible emotion, though Alexander thought he detected a flicker of something that might have been gratitude for the king's mercy. As the guards prepared to escort Isabella from the throne room to begin her imprisonment in the Tower of Aldoria, she stopped and turned back to address Alexander directly. You will make a good king, she said quietly. Despite everything that has happened, I want you to know that my affection for you was genuine. You have wisdom and strength that will serve Aldoria well in the challenges ahead. Alexander stared at her, struggling to reconcile this moment of apparent sincerity with the years of calculated deception she had perpetrated. I will never understand how someone capable of genuine affection could also be capable of such comprehensive betrayal. Perhaps, Isabella replied, that is what will make you a better ruler than those who see the world in simple terms of loyalty and betrayal. The reality of leadership is that most choices involve competing loyalties and impossible decisions. With those words, she allowed the guards to escort her from the chamber, her footsteps echoing through the great throne room one final time, as she disappeared into the shadows of the corridors that had been her home for over 2 decades. In the aftermath of her departure, the court remained silent for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what they had witnessed. The revelation of Isabella's true identity and activities would send shockwaves throughout European noble society and fundamentally alter Aldoria's approach to security and diplomacy. Alexander approached his father's throne and knelt briefly in acknowledgement of the king's authority, but also in recognition of the immense challenges that lay ahead for both of them. Father, he said quietly, what are your instructions regarding the information Isabella gathered? How do we protect the kingdom from the damage she may have already done? King Marcus placed a weak but steady hand on his son's shoulder. We rebuild. We strengthen our security protocols. We carefully review every alliance and policy decision that Isabella might have influenced. And most importantly, we remember that the greatest threats to a kingdom sometimes wear the most trusted faces. Sir Edmund approached with preliminary reports from the ongoing investigation of other potential conspirators. The work of identifying and neutralizing the remaining security threats would continue for months, possibly years. The damage assessment alone would require extensive coordination with allied intelligence services. But as Alexander looked around the throne room at the portraits of his ancestors who had faced invasions, civil wars, and countless other threats to the kingdom's survival, he felt a profound sense of continuity and purpose. Each generation of rulers had faced challenges that tested their resolve and wisdom. Some threats came from external enemies who announced their hostility openly. Others, like the one they had just confronted, came from those who exploited trust and love as weapons of war. The kingdom of Aldoria would survive this betrayal, as it had survived others throughout its long history. The crown would endure, strengthened by the painful lessons learned about the price of vigilance and the complex responsibilities of leadership. As the court began to disperse and return to their various duties, Alexander remained beside his father's throne, contemplating the future that now lay before them. The young prince, who had once dreamed of modernizing the monarchy through idealistic reforms, had learned that sometimes the crown's greatest duty was not inspiring hope, but confronting the harsh realities that threatened everything his people held dear. The sun was now fully risen, casting bright light through the tall windows and illuminating the ancient throne that would someday be his to occupy. When that day came, Alexander would be ready to bear its weight with the wisdom earned through betrayal, the strength forged in crisis, and the understanding that true leadership meant protecting those who trusted him, even when that trust came at a terrible personal cost.